Hi everyone, welcome. This interior that you can see here is a domestic interior by industrial designer Karim Rashid, and I will be bookending all of my lectures with interesting designers and architects and interior designers that you may wish to do extra research on. So this is Karim Rashid here, born 1960, an industrial designer with Egyptian Canadian heritage. And as you could see from the first slide, he's big on choosing loud colors, really vibrant color palette and aesthetic, and his works focus on organic design. So throughout this semester, you are observing how people interact in spaces. We're looking at furniture design for commercial foyers, entry halls, gallery spaces, those sorts of applications. We're also going to be investigating manufacturing and materials, and you will be exploring design concepts through sketching, making, crafting, and doing some experimental iterative models. Make sure that you record your process as you go along. It's important to record not only your sketch work, but also your modeling, maybe some CAD that you're developing, and using multimedia is fantastic. You will also be researching historical pieces to build your understanding of the social, cultural, environmental impacts of furniture and design over time. You're going to be working towards meeting the client's design brief, and we all met our client for this year, Maxton Fox Joinery. But most importantly, you are developing your design skills, technique, and knowledge. And a lot of you might have goals that you want to set for yourself, and I think that's fantastic. If you've got something that you want to improve on, so it could be your SolidWorks, or it could be your graphic presentation skills, or it might be your building your confidence in terms of presenting to a panel of judges. In this particular lecture, we will be looking at what is meant by design semantics, the impact of this concept on our discipline, and how it impacts furniture over time. Now, some of you might be looking at this series of words and you may not know what it says. Others will be going, yeah, I know exactly what this says. Okay, so we've got some almost calligraphy style writing, and there's a big exclamation mark somewhere there. And you might be wondering what this text actually says. So there's a hint. Or you might look at this and go, okay, well, I think I know what this is. I might have seen the first word somewhere. There's a gap between the first and second word, and then there's some other symbols there. One at the start, which is upside down, and one at the end. And then there's a curly sort of symbol on top of the N. So those of you from Spanish-speaking backgrounds, you might know what that says. Of course, if you're in this class, you would definitely know this series. So happy birthday, sort of screamed at someone, but there's a smiley face there. And then happy birthday. So a couple of exclamation marks change the way that we say a particular word or string of words. So from that little example, that you can see that our language has structure and syntax, whether it's the first slide that I showed you with the Arabic writing, or whether it's the last one, which sounds quite excited. And in fact, in one of them, I've actually included a little emoji just to add emphasis. So just as our language has structure and syntax, so you may have seen that word used in relation to how we write a sentence, well, objects have structure and syntax as well. This lecture is all about the language of objects. The idea of design semantics was really kicked off by Klaus Krippendorf and Reinhard Butter. So in 1987, there was a big conference, a design conference, and the term design semantics kind of evolved from there. However, we also see evidence of this term in design history and theory when we look at Kensei engineering. And that's a concept that was developed by Mitsuo Nagamachi in 1974. So really interesting that Kensei engineering was emerging in Japan, and design semantics came out of Europe, kind of spearheaded by Krippendorf, Butter, and also Don Norman, who you might be familiar with, because we often talk about Don Norman. He's kind of like the godfather of industrial design during the 80s, 90s, and now. So Kensei engineering is really interesting because Nagamachi really adapted this concept to the design of cars, and Toyota embraced it and used it in a lot of their vehicle development, concept design throughout the 70s, 80s, and even now. So if you go onto the Mazda website, you will find evidence of Kensei engineering still being used. So what is Kensei engineering? It's the impact of design traits and features on our emotions and psyche. So the question that we need to think about is, how can designers harness this power and use it for good? So have you ever had a car that you love? You have to think about why. Why did you love that car? Might have been the color, it might have been its cuteness, or it might have looked like a muscle car. So we use these words to describe cars, but there are specific traits embedded in these objects that make us gravitate towards them. So design semantics considers how an object's form communicates something about the object itself, i.e., when we look at an object or use an object, it has a story or a narrative. It might communicate something about the larger context of its use. So if it's an object that's supposed to be used like around a swimming pool, we'll know that it's probably encased in a material that prevents water entering its technical package. And then it also communicates something about the user who interacts with it and develops a conceptual connection. We often see this sort of idea in toys, because we know that little children need to have not only toys to play with, but we need to make sure that they're safe. So very often little toys for preschoolers will have very large rounded edges. Okay, so we know that we need to design in a certain way so that the user who interacts with that particular object can develop a conceptual connection. In objects, communication between a designer and a user is not linear. Okay, so that we don't always understand what we're supposed to do with the object. However, as a designer, we can embed meaning into those objects so that a user can interact with it and can interpret it successfully. So just like, for those of you that come from non-English speaking backgrounds, you will know how to read in one particular language, and you can interpret that sort of text because you've grown up with that meaning in your cognitive sort of development. So in the same way that text communicates to us when we read a sentence, designers also have the ability to teach people how to read objects. Therefore, we're very much like the author of a book. We mediate the narrative.